Well, team, I am super excited today to have an amazing guest, somebody who I've looked up to in the agriculture industry for a long, long time. Somebody who I've met at various events and fraternity events and things like that around the industry, who has led at the highest echelons and consulted at the highest echelons of this industry. So super excited to have the wealth of knowledge that you bring, Mike. So welcome to the Intentional Agribusiness Leader podcast, Mike Borel.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Good to have you on. I'm super excited about this. So our opening question for you today, Mike, is what does it mean to you to be intentional?
Well, to me, it means having a purpose, both overall and for each activity. So that's something that I've subscribed to pretty much my entire life, and it's served me well.
I love that. Very succinct. And so to have a purpose overall, so something I'm striving for, something I'm striving toward, that is my reason for existing, something I'm pursuing, and then for each activity. And what I love about that is, and this is part of the reason that I'm creating this podcast, is the good many people that aren't intentional with a lot of things they do on a day-to-day basis. We're very blindly flowing through the day, on autopilot, sort of survival mode in many cases. And I suppose we all have those days, right? But it's it's good to be intentional with the various tasks and things like that that we have before us. So good. So Mike, as I look around the industry, you and I are both in consulting types of roles. We get to look under the hoods of a lot of different organizations, and I know what you guys have built at Context is an incredible, just an incredible service to the industry. And I want to talk more about that here in a little bit. But so what I find is many organizations, if not most, are struggling with talent retention. So what are you guys? Let's start with Context. So what are you guys doing at Context to be intentional about retaining the folks that you recruit, whether they're contract or whether they're full-time employees?
Well, we have pretty good luck with retention. It's not perfect or 100% by any. As you can imagine, consulting is a wonderful training ground, and you expose people to major companies, clients all the time. And
of course,
when we lose somebody, we generally are losing them to a client.
mm-hmm.
And while we hate losing an investment, we look at it really as getting emplaced in a client another supporter. We haven't parted companies on bad terms with anyone, and by and large we retain. Of our employees, the things that really seem to make a big difference, both in attracting them and keeping them, we offer flexibility in location.
Mm-hmm.
You can live pretty much where you want to live. There are situations where we'll want you in an office for a couple of years to kind of get fully up to speed, but certainly after that, you're completely flexible. So we support that. We work from home. We offer unlimited comp time to our employees. So they're putting in a bunch of time on something, they can add up the extra and take that off when they want to. We've got a steady stream of exciting projects. That probably should have been the first thing I mentioned.
Sure. Yeah.
Intellectual stimulation is off the chart, and that's exciting. It's hard to miss that. I've loved my corporate career, and wouldn't trade it for anything. But now that I know what's possible when I'm working for myself,
Yeah,
wouldn't go back either.
of course.
The other thing, you have clear metrics. I think that's important. People have to know how's their performance going to be measured. Ideally, a mechanism where they can measure themselves. They're not completely reliant on somebody else telling them how they're doing or or what the scorecard might say. So that's what I'd say would be how we both attract and retain.
Mhm.
And we've got a pretty strong record on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I love what you brought up there at the end about clear metrics. And, I spend a bulk of my time currently anyway, working in the ag retail channel with various clients. And that's one of the things that we're constantly trying to help people work on is defining what does success look like so that we actually can mark some sort of progress. What are the lead, not just the lagging indicators of success, but the leading indicators of success as well, which often goes overlooked. We're usually measuring reactively versus proactively.
Leading's so important, but also it's sometimes a challenge to figure what those leading indicators are.
Right.
Someday, Mark, I'm going to write a book titled "It's About Doing What's Easy Not to Do."
Sure.
And I think, that's one of it's easy not to do the leading indicators. It's easy to take the lagging ones, but it's not nearly as effective.
Mhm. Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. So you mentioned loving your corporate career. Tell us just a little bit about that. Let's divert from the standard questions and just share a little bit about your background. How did you come up to this place, and then transition to context?
Well, okay, I'll try to give the Reader's Digest version.
Yeah.
But I'm an Iowa farm kid. Yeah, I joined DuPont right out of college, uh, and had a litany of roles, and each one more challenging than the one before. Each one probably faster than I necessarily would have designed it for myself, but always kept me challenged. And I did various things, including I had the opportunity to manage Australasia, Southeast Asia out of Sydney, Australia for 4 years.
Wow.
Transferred to Paris, where I was responsible for Europe, Middle East, and Africa. And those were my first general management jobs, and I just fell in love with it. Chance to have all the levers and really make a difference.
Wow.
And I just really had a fantastic career with DuPont. And one of the toughest decisions I ever made was leaving DuPont. Well, you regularly get recruiters calling up, and frankly, I just was never really interested. I had a great career there, et cetera, but I got to a point where I was ready for the next challenge, and I had a call that I said, okay, I'll talk about it. And when I really got into it, I said, look, this one's not for me. But they said, well, look, we've got something else cooking that I think really would trip your trigger. Can we call you again? I said, well, sure, if you got something a lot better. Well, they did, and so I was recruited by Sumitomo. I took the job. I had North America and South America responsibility for them, and that was a great job. And during that time, I led the acquisition of the Abbott Ag Specialty business, which became their global biologicals business, and that folded under my responsibility for a couple of years as well. But ultimately, they needed to do some things that I was absolutely convinced on. They were not absolutely convinced on, and we decided. I gave an ultimatum, and they called my bluff, and I left.
Sure.
And literally, I started. I really was looking for the next C-level job, and started consulting really so that I didn't have to be in a hurry. And I fell in love with it. And I was fortunate that I got traction immediately. And interesting, perhaps, looking at all the different things you do, Mark. So the things that really made a difference for me in corporate America were I was really good at strategy, and I was really good at leadership. So I hung out my shingle to offer, strategy development, consulting, and leadership coaching and development. Well, all the traction came in strategy. I got nothing in the leadership arena. So pretty soon I dropped that part.
Mm-hmm.
And shortly after I started this, my own sole proprietorship business, Trey Thomas, who had Context Network, and Steve Hawkins, who had his own practice, we decided to merge the three of us and make Context Network a multi-partner firm. And so we did that.
Okay.
And I'd like to say the rest is history.
Yeah. It's fascinating now, and you guys have grown so much. I've sort of watched from the side, I'm looking at, outside the fishbowl looking in, and there's so many people. So many of my favorite people in agriculture actually are part of your network. How many partners and what's the broad scope, if you can give me some idea?
Absolutely. So there's 12 of us share the ownership, 12 partners. There's just over 70 full-time dedicated people.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
There's over 200 part-time industry experts in one either sector or function or region or some matrix of that on that part-time basis.
Okay.
And we're global. North America is our largest region, but it's less than half of the total. So.
Wow, incredible. It's very, and running a professional training and coaching firm. I mean, that's the very narrow slice of what's possible in the consulting arena. I can attest how challenging it is to build something like that and keep people together and keep everything thriving, because project work comes and goes, right? Some of it's reoccurring, very little of it is recurring unless you have certain types of contracts. And so you guys are working hard to make a big influence in the industry.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so while you're doing that, I'm sure you get to take a look at the various cultures in all the different businesses that there are around this space in agribusiness. So culture is a nice buzzword. A lot of people talk about it. I find very few are really intentional with actually creating it. So what from your perspective, what's the most important thing when it comes to building an intentional business culture?
My personal belief and experience is that making it safe to to share their views, their thoughts, their experiences is the most important element of culture you can have. And a saying that I have used and continue to use is that, look, all thoughts and perceptions are friendly if shared. If you share them and it's something that needs attention and nothing happens, well, then that's bad. But the information is a gift, and look at it that way. And if people feel and experience that they can be absolutely safe sharing what they think, what they feel, what they see, that, in my opinion, really helps develop a trust, and trust is the most important element in culture.
Yeah, wonderful. I just want to riff on this a little bit, Mike, because when so we do a lot of coaching, and over 10,000 hours of coaching hours logged since 2014 when we first started doing it, just virtual coaching across many coaches. And we sit back, we talk about what are the different things that come up, what are the challenges, how do we overcome, what resources do we need to provide, what additional training or coaching or whatever. One of the biggest coaching issues consistently is something like whatever, I stuck my neck out and, sort of whatever, got my head cut off and got my hand slapped. I tried to bring up something to my boss, right? And it either wasn't listened to, it wasn't respected again and again. Just the other day, I probably spent 45 minutes of an hour call just listening to a group of salespeople complain about their national sales manager and how he hasn't been out to see them, and they're not running any programs, and they're not motivated to get up and go do, right? And so my response is just go sell. Like that's your job. Go do your thing. That's part of the response, but you also have to hear people out. And so often we end up getting used as the safe space because there's no negative consequence to sharing, but that doesn't necessarily solve problems internally, right? So why do you think, I mean, is it, well, first of all, I want to pick this part. Is this a failure of leadership, or is this a failure of courage of people not willing to step up and just speak their mind regardless of what's going on? From your years of experience, how do you trace this back to the root?
It's a great question, and in my opinion, it's a combination of both of those things, and probably others as well. Uh, it Human nature is that, you know, it's not easy to give direct feedback. It's not easy to really call out the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
And so a lot of it doesn't happen because of personal discomfort around it. I think that's a really big part of it. But that completely gets in the way of making it better in the future.
Right.
You have this climate where it's safe. Now, what you just described as this kind of vent session, yeah, you have to do that, but boy, I want to limit that. I want to get that transition to, well, how do we make it better? Okay, it's an issue. We can whinge about it for hours, but that's not going to change it. So how are we going to change it? And sometimes it involves a really direct conversation with one or more individuals. Sometimes it requires changing individuals in a position.
Mm-hmm.
Willing to do all those things.
Yeah. From if I'm thinking about, the CEOs or the senior vice presidents, the highest level, or the chiefs, the chiefs of the industry, how much of the culture ought to be driven there versus maybe at the mid-level of an organization? I mean, at the end of the day, I know everybody gets to experience it and everybody's responsible for their own piece of it. As far as driving change and saying, hey, these are the standards that we uphold. This is how it is around here. This is how we keep it safe. This is how we measure certain metrics and keep people accountable and things like that. So is there a place for, in your opinion, where it's more important than others?
It's a good question. My personal opinion is you can never expect better behavior people reporting to you than you demonstrate yourself. So, in my opinion, starting at the top is the best place for it to be. Now, that said, some of it depends a little bit on the size of the organization and the proximity of the top person to everyone. So I think you can influence this in a major way from almost any place in an organization.
Mhm.
But the very best place for it to be demonstrated the way it should be is at the top. Now, I can tell you, in my career, I've had some really great leaders, managers that were great role models. I've had a few that were just abysmal, terrible, and you learned from them what not to do. And but you don't stop
Right.
a leader that's not demonstrating the right kind of behavior and culture.
Mm-hmm.
You demonstrate the right kind, and you do your best to segment off that person, because you're not the only one that's going to have noticed this.
Right. Right.
You're trying to make the change. Complaining about it to others isn't going to help at all. In fact, it's going to hurt.
Mm-hmm.
But you model the right behavior. You work toward change, and ultimately, those people, they won't last. it just, and now I've wished that not lasting would have happened quicker in a case or two, but ultimately it was true.
Yeah. 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 I think for most people, I mean, regardless of where you're at in the organization, or if you're in a position in an organization where maybe you don't have the highest levels of positional authority, and you don't pull the budget, you don't hold the purse strings to the budget, don't get to determine what always gets incentivized or not incentivized, or called out or not called out. I think it's important to, at least for me, I want to know, am I doing the best job that I know that I can at my role, given whatever the situation is? So even if I have a bad boss, right, or a leader who I don't enjoy working for, as long as, I mean, and this is where a lot of people get really messed up in their head, their mindsets really start to go sideways. And this is where attrition starts to become really rampant, right? Because if somebody's having a bad day with their employer and they feel like there's nothing they can do to solve for this, then as soon as that recruiter calls and offers an extra 5 or 10,000 a year, it's very tempting. So, but I think, to me, it becomes incumbent upon leaders to do a better job of becoming more intentional about building the cultures. And that's part of the reason that we're creating this podcast and putting it out to the agribusiness space, is to call more leaders up to be more intentional about the cultures, the spaces that they're creating for their people to work in. One of the things that I've said over the years is that I believe that leaders have a moral obligation to create a space within which people have the opportunity to thrive.
I said that. I agree.
Yeah. So Danny Meyer, who the CEO, founder of Shake Shack and a number of other restaurant, enterprises. I saw him once at Tony Robbins, and he described culture. He said, culture is like raising a newborn baby. You have to feed it 10 or 12 times a day. And when it craps its pants, you damn well better do something about it.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah. All right. So moving on. So for you, Mike, what's been over the years, if you could pick one, what's been your biggest win as a leader?
Oh, I've been blessed. I don't think I could pick one. I'd probably talk about my children being adults, making a positive difference, raising great children. Probably at the top, but taking the Australia business for DuPont from number 12 to number 2 and in a very short time was and having the team just be so energized and exceeding the expectations of everyone but themselves was a real turn on. Mm-hmm. Growing the Valent business in spite of Roundup Ready crops. I came in there in 1995, and the prognosis was that their portfolio was just going to be crucified and the company was going to be crucified. But that didn't happen. We were able to do something else. I've been putting 30% of my time into volunteer work, literally for the last 23 years. And I'm pretty proud of the fact that one of those passions are wildlife conservation and youth in agriculture, those two areas. So the youth, that's FFA and Alpha Gamma Rho. But the wild sheep, in my lifetime, we've helped North American wild sheep recover from roughly 3,000 in 1973 to over 200,000 today and growing.
Really? Wow, that's fascinating.
That's more of an answer than you were looking for, but those are things that come top of mind to me.
Yeah. Why is giving so important to you?
I just think it's the right thing to do. Now, it's interesting that I made this conscious choice about the percentage of time, and it was a percentage that I felt like, okay, I can sustain this. I suspect that no one around me in my work life will even notice that I'm giving 30% of my time to something else. Mm-hmm. That's been true. And most people who know me know my passions and know I'm doing things there. But in 23 years, nobody said, well, Mike, kind of looks like you're slacking here a little bit. Are you putting too much time into those things? No, nobody's ever said that.
Sure.
And I don't think anyone ever will, because I don't think you'd notice. Now, it helps, Mark, that I love work. I love work. I love being busy. I love being challenged. I love thinking about the next thing. So.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, that's the measurable impact, right, of being involved with something that's taken a group. I mean, what, 3,000 sheep that were left?
Yeah.
3,000 to over 200,000. I mean, that's I don't even have the mental power to do the multiple on that, but that's, I mean, that's fantastic. And to be able to be involved with that by being intentional with your giving, right? And yeah.
To be clear, this didn't happen just because of me alone by any stretch.
Yeah.
It's a fun fraternity that I enjoy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just being able to be involved with the giving. Christine and I are really big on this. So when we put together, we're both self-employed. When we put together our personal goals, our leading indicator is how much do we get to give this year? So this is like, our focus is on, if we know that we're able to donate, let's say $100,000 this year, that means that we did $1 million in business because we had the 10% with appropriate margins and we ran the business correctly so that we were capable of doing that. So everything is based off of that number or a number like that, as opposed to something else. Right. And then even like down to the day. So the first fruits of the day. And I talk about this a lot with our clients and personal coaching, about how do we create more certainty. Well, my recipe for creating more personal certainty is when, I wake up and I drink a bunch of water to hydrate the body. I spend a little time, I'll have a cup of coffee while I read a chapter out of my 1 year, study Bible. And when I do those three things, and I'm not going to say I don't hit this every single day, so I'm not perfect, but on the days that I do, when I do that, I have much more certainty as I go throughout the day. So when right before you and I got on, a significant deal got pulled, right? Cost us a few multiple five figures. And so that triggers you. I mean, that never feels good when something goes backwards, right? But I have the certainty. I know I'm going to be okay. We'll bounce back. We've been there before. We'll do it again. And it's just those little leading indicators, but we call it the first fruits. So it's the first fruits of the day where we're giving that time to study, to God, to be able to, to be in that space. And then we try to practice that with our money. And this is, it's, for us, a lifetime in learning, and then coming together and being intentional about what we want to create, right, in our lives. And so last couple of questions before I fully run out of time with you here. What tips do you have for somebody that wants to maybe maximize their productivity throughout the day? You seem like a fairly healthy guy. Seems like you keep your stuff in order. Every time I see you, you look strong, So what do you do to kind of keep your productivity high as someone who loves to work, as someone who loves to give and be intentional?
Yeah. Well, I think you need to have a plan, and you need to know what you want to or need to accomplish. And I think you have to do that daily, or at least in my experience, I need to do that daily. And I generally like to do it, in the later in the day before. I want to know what it is I need to get done. And some of it will be things I need to respond to, et cetera. But a piece of that's going to be, what am I doing looking forward? From being in a service business that if you're always working on work that's in your hands, pretty soon that'll finish and you're not going to have what's going to fill it in later. So if you're not putting energy in every week to getting new business, you're gonna miss out. And I'm fortunate that I'm past that, that highs and lows, that peaks and troughs, which I think just about everybody in one of these businesses feels, until you get, kind of large enough with a big enough span and a staff, et cetera, you can really smooth those out. And I'm at that point. It's a nice place to be. Yeah, anyway, so
Yeah.
I don't think this is another one of those things. It's easy not to do, but it's so important to do. Have a plan, make notes. I check off stuff too, I get it done, it gets an X, hey, all right, yay.
Yeah. Yeah. Our brains like that little hit of dopamine that comes with it's addicting, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. If what book or books would you recommend that have made a big impact on you?
So I've been a voracious reader my whole life. Now, I was a really voracious reader on business, on strategy, on marketing for a whole lot of years. That really got started when I had a planning job in DuPont, and I'm thankful for that. The picking one out would be kind of hard, but James Autry, The Art of Love and Profit, is a book that I would recommend to anybody, as it's not a long read, but it just kind of grabs your heart, tells you, talks real, talks about threads and connections and doing what's easy not to do. Those are my words, not his, but I think that's a good one. On current books, frankly, I still read a lot. I haven't read anything recently that just completely blew me away to recommend. But it's important to keep reading. It's important to keep up with the gurus of the industry. I like strategy particularly, so that's always going to be something that I follow. Leadership's also important to me, but honestly, that's less important in my current role than strategy would be.
Of course, of course. Well, we'll make sure we link up that recommendation. We'll find it on Amazon and link it up in the show notes so that people can get access to that. And I've actually not heard of that one, so I'm going to take a look at that one myself.
I like it.
Good. All right, Mike. Any last thoughts as far as sharing what it means to be an intentional leader before we close it down? And then, by all means, please let us know how we can how companies can look up context and get in touch with you.
Yeah, I can't think of anything else particularly. I would applaud you for doing this. I've been fascinated watching you and your career, your communication, your development over time, and this seems like a very appropriate and meaningful and impactful next step. I love it. So
Thank you.
If there's any way I can be helpful to you, going forward, all you have to do is ask.
Very good. Much appreciated. All right. Let's well, Mike, thank you for taking the time out of your day to do the interview, be a part of the inaugural season here of the Intentional Agribusiness Leader podcast. My hope is that people take bits and pieces from these interviews with people like you, people that have been around the industry and really had a lot of influence over people, and just be more intentional. So thank you. All right.